Folks, you are at the right place. The Remodelers on the Rise podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hunt. Happy New Year for most of you listening to it. It's still probably January. If it happens to be that you're listening to this in July, happy belated New Year. Happy 4th of July. If you're listening to this at Christmas time, Merry Christmas. Who knows when people will be consuming this, but glad you are listening. I have a guest this fine day. Her name is Laura Birkey. Her business is called A Long Work. And I have gotten to know her over the last couple of years, and she is a DISC, D-I-S-C, DISC expert. You're going to hear a lot about that today. And fun fact about Laura is her family and her are renovating, and you guys are still married so far?
Yes.
Through this? Oh, good. Her and her husband are still married. They are slowly renovating a 120-year-old house. Are you also living in said house while renovating?
Indeed.
Amazing.
There's no other way to do this.
Oh, Nelly. Oh, Nelly. So tell, because everybody listening are probably leaning back in their chair of like, oh, tell us how easy this is, Laura. Tell us a little bit about that and why you undertook it, and then introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into some talk about DISC.
Yeah. Well, I have a life model of doing hard things. I just choose the hard route. So yeah, it seems like it might be an easier way to move out and renovate. But we're going through the hard way. So we, when we get into electrical, we are, breaking into individual walls and then repatching those rather than stripping it all down. I don't think we thought it was going to be a full reno. And technically, I don't think we're ever going to do all the walls again, but it is a process. And so my husband has learned electrical. I've gotten really good at patching walls and painting and trim.
And what's one thing you've learned about the remodeling world, because you're talking to those people? What's one thing you learned through this here process so far?
Oh my gosh. Well, just that it's a tedious job. It is not for the faint-hearted. And so you really have to have a mindset for the long-term vision, and you have to have patience for the process, because nothing will ever unfold in the way that you hope it will unfold. And so learning to be, goal-oriented, but also patient with that process is just an interesting combination.
I'm hearing patience. I'm hearing
not
planning.
Easy for a high dominance, high D person. So,
she can't help herself. She's already jumping into DISC profiles. Yes. Introduce yourself a little bit, and then tell us what DISC is.
Yes. Okay. Well, I feel like I want to back into my entrepreneurship journey a little bit, partly because the way it overlaps with why DISC is so exciting to me is I think it so well connects with how people show up in their work. So, and I've been on this unpacking journey to find a meaningful, purposeful work for myself. So I started out in social work for 6 years. I shifted out of that into entrepreneurship to be more home and present with my family when we started having kids. We have 4 now, and that's final and done. And now we're trying to
never say never.
Never say never. I know, but yeah, my daughter.
I held a baby. I think it was actually Christmas Eve service, and I held this baby of friends of ours, and I thought to myself, honey, maybe we should have another. And she quickly slapped that right out of my mouth.
It's a fun dream, but it's
yes.
So I became a photographer, and that has been a really fun creative outlet, but it did not connect well with my deepest sense of purpose. So then I found myself volunteering a ton at my church. And I got really excited about organization and strategy and exploring each person's unique individual contribution to the team and how you collaborate. And then through that space of ministry and church, I also found just that deep sense of purpose in connecting with people one-on-one for developing and wholeness and growth and all of that. So from there, I kind of shifted into a focus on yoga, and I did an endurance race. So I thought I might as well take care of my body while I'm breaking it into a million pieces for this endurance race, which endurance races has been a theme for us in terms of a long work. So asking myself, what are rhythms and practices that are going to facilitate me not just surviving this, but actually enjoying myself and maintaining integrity as I go about that. And so I became a yoga instructor, but I still wasn't like, this is it, I found my thing. So, I'm just adventuring my way through
Trying things.
as a high D would, right? They just jump. So through lots of different adventures. So at that point, I could start to call myself a bit of a coach, right? In kind of advocating for wholeness and wellness and physical strength. But then I started working with a friend of mine who started a leadership firm. So I was with him for 3 years doing, and that's where I got exposed to the DISC tool set. So exposed to the coaching model there and really loved, I felt like I just came alive watching people grow in self-awareness, kind of start to unlock some of their greatest skills, figure out ways to communicate and collaborate so that the thing that they love to do, they can do, and they don't die inside in the process or
always
just miss each other,
important.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Not dying in the process is
gotcha. So interesting. Sometimes entrepreneurial journeys are like that, where it's like, why didn't I find it sooner? But every piece that you did, every part of experience that you had kind of contributed to this. Oh, speaking of kids.
So bad. Taylor.
Yes. I love it when this happens. SOS. Now Bailey can edit this. She's the editor. She's the producer, so she can decide if. So is your husband at home and he was in charge of making sure that?
Yes.
Wow, that's an epic fail, sir.
Yep.
It's all good. It's all good. The tone of Remodelers on the Rise. Bailey, don't edit that out. It's just fine and dandy. If people can't understand work-life balance and work-life integration and juggling things, so be it.
And it's much more acceptable post 2020, right? Everyone's a little more familiar with the newscaster who's casting from home. Their kid comes in. And it's also why we do what we do is that we want to, I want people to be able to be home and present with their families and not be spending 80, 90-hour work weeks to keep their business afloat.
Like so my favorite video from like the oh crap I'm on video is like there was somebody that walked in and then they realized it and they hit the floor and they like crawled out, but they're still like perfectly within vision of the camera. That was funny. Oh, 2020 and 2021. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you've embraced this on the DISC side over the last number of years. You've worked with some of my clients and some of their teams on DISC. So tell us what DISC is, and if I'm a remodeler listening to this, why should I kind of care about this? Why should I be interested in learning about this? Yeah.
Okay. So DISC is a tool set that measures how you show up or how you like to, or most naturally will show up to your work. So, the 4 categories are dominance, which is really just how you approach problems and challenges, influence, how you influence others to your point of view, steadiness, how you respond to the pace of the environment. Some people just think about walking, right? Some people walk slowly and take their time and enjoy the scenery and don't rush me ever. And then there's, people who are just flitting all over the place, moving and going super fast. And then compliance, how you respond to rules and procedures set by others, right? Rule followers and not necessarily rule breakers, but just finding their own path in life.
So as an example, if I had somebody come up to me at my son's basketball game and said, "Hey, Kyle, I saw you sprinting. You parked downtown and I saw you sprinting into a store. As far as steadiness goes, where would you have a hunch that I fall on that?"
At the bottom.
Yeah. At the bottom. Yeah. I'm running. I'm
probably trying to fit all the things in.
Yeah, I've been told I do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So go ahead. So DISC, that's kind of the basic understanding of it. And it's how we show up. So there's not necessarily a good DISC profile. There's not necessarily a bad. It's more, here after hundreds of thousands of people have taken this and we understand human nature and psychology, it gives us insight into maybe why we do what we do the way we do it, why others do what they do the way they do it. And that self-awareness can make a really big impact in leading people, in doing better work. Exactly. I've been learning DISC over the last few years. I feel like that was the best I've ever done at explaining it.
That was amazing. Good job.
Okay, good.
In addition to that is communication. So how you communicate, which, right, isn't it like 80% of all problems, relational problems are because of communication. And so if as a leader or, anybody learns how to communicate effectively to the person who you're trying to talk to and communicate to, there's just key strategies that will blow those problems out of the park.
Gotcha.
And
So
so,
if I'm a remodeler listening to this and I'm like, well, I've heard of various different personality profiles,
mhm.
tell them why they should really dig in and care about this.
Well, I think it's way more straightforward. So like Myers-Briggs, I think is the other big one out there, but that one's too many letters, just too much going on, hard to understand. I feel like our report breaks it down into really simple ways. You just understand high or low on each of the 4 categories. And really, if you zone in on 2 for one person, you're going to understand a lot about them, where they're highest or where they're lowest in each of those categories. And low does not mean a lack. It's not bad. It's just where they end on that spectrum. And so I just think it's more simple. And then I think we blend it with a few other tool sets, but my favorite one is the driving forces. And so we don't just stop at how you like to show up, right? That's very surface level, but also why you show up. And so driving forces explores motivation and what keeps people feeling satisfied in their work. And so just thinking through that a little bit more, you can even start to strategize, certain people, who do I put on certain teams? These 2 people seem to work well together because of their communication styles or their different strengths. And you can really build some amazing strategy around that. But most importantly is if you have someone that does really good work, you want to keep them. So you don't want to be trampling all over their driving forces and ignoring that when there's really key ways and simple ways to keep them motivated and engaged.
What I've seen is when people when they take it themselves and then they have some of their key people start to I need to stop saying key people. Somebody called me out on that. What? There's some non-key people in your business? Okay, so I need to change that. But important. You have some of your team members take it and they work with somebody like you to actually do a debrief and to go through, here's what I'm seeing, here's why, and so they start to understand it. It's amazing how 98% of the time, it's like, holy crap, how did that, by answering, spending 15, 20 minutes taking this test and answering these different questions, man, that is spot on. Oh, that is why this person comes with a little bit more fire when a challenge comes up. This is why this person really gets antsy when we just throw a task at them, but don't show them step by step how to do it. This is why this person, people seem to just be like a magnet to them, and they draw people to them because they're in a high eye. It's just interesting how accurate it is, and what everything that you were describing from a remodeler standpoint is. Leadership is an underappreciated aspect of running a remodeling business. As I continue in my coaching, years and years of coaching, what I'm seeing is leadership and leading your team well continues, especially once you figure out a little bit of the financials. You've got your sales process pretty solid. Your marketing is working. Your leadership skills in how to grow and motivate and encourage and make your place a wonderful place to work. It comes down to leadership, and having a tool like DISC for your team can be a huge help in that. So if I have an existing team and I've got, let's say 8 people on my team, 10 people on my team, talk to us, or maybe even go through the example of how you did this with Nelson Builders, longtime client of mine up in beautiful Holland, Michigan. It's a very Dutch area, and there's wooden. Has anybody heard of wooden shoes? It's a thing in Holland, Michigan. It's also Tulip Festival that'll be coming up in March and April. But maybe explain kind of the approach that you took with them, and maybe some of the insights that not only Josh as the leader received from it, but also amongst the team members.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up leadership. So as a leader, if you understand why you need to modify your communication, right? Why you shouldn't just lob that at a person and expect them to be fine, or why maybe you should delegate more or whatever, you're much more likely to do it if you understand. You can see the big picture of why this makes sense and why this helps and why that helps this specific person. So it's a game changer in that way. But yeah, with that team, I had so much fun. They're such a great team in terms of the way that they intentional with relationships and having fun. And I also think really it speaks volumes to your employees when you give them this opportunity to learn about themselves and have a chance to communicate meaningfully with each other. So what we did is, I think we actually started out with some hiring stuff for them. And then once their team was in place, we gave them like 2 or 3 months where the people were getting situated in their roles. And then we had everyone take the DISC again. And at that point, I sat down with each person for about an hour, and we went through some key pages on their report. It's a lengthy, thorough, awesome
Yep.
report, but I help break it down into really practical things. And everybody leaves feeling so excited about what they've learned about themselves. And then I kind of do a little debrief with the leader and talk about how we can, what would be some helpful next steps. And so for them, we sat down in a room. Thankfully, Holland's pretty close, so it was easy for me to drive over there from Chicago, and sat down in a room and I was just the facilitator. They were, bringing the gold for each other, what they learned about each other, about what they learned about themselves, and then get the chance to hear from each other. That was such a sweet time, in terms of people, like the light bulbs going off. We play this fun game called Two Truths and a Try. So, a little throw off where people share two things that they do well, and then one thing that they have to really work towards based on behavioral stuff of their disc.
That's cool.
And then you go around and guess, well, which one of those is really your try? And that was so much fun. We had, people were laughing.
So when you say people go, they take the test, they do the debrief with you, and they, get some insight into it, and they're quite excited about what they're learning about themselves. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, they're just feeling seen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a weirdo, there's just this level of, also I am unique, right? I don't fit perfectly in a box. I'm not just what someone else, I'm not, if you're a tradesman, I'm not just a carpenter that shows up this way. We're all the same,
Right.
For that team, we had carpenters who were high S and carpenters who were high D, which are on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
So they show up in different ways. And there's real strength to that. But understanding why you show up that way, and the different little variables in terms of how you communicate, how you should go approach the process. Like, there's some very high detailed carpenters out there, right? So they're going to want to get the job done very perfectly. And then there's some ones who are more concerned about the pace, so they want to make sure they're not feeling too rushed. Or then there's ones who just want to get as much done, and if their teammate could do it in 30 minutes, he's going to do it in 25 minutes, and that's just the name of the game for him. But that's what helps him be engaged. So I just think knowing why you're doing it that way, and then you can start to adjust yourself
to others, right? Even that example you just gave, a higher D that's just like, boom, we're doing it this way, go, drive. A higher S where they like a certain pace, and when it's rushed, they get all antsy. And then we've got the higher C that, that person needs the step-by-step directions, and that really puts them at ease and puts them at peace. To lead a team that has each of those, all of a sudden, there's a lot more, what I've seen and what I heard even from what you did with Nelson, there's just a lot more opportunity for some empathy. Not, why don't you just do it my way? Oh, wait, your mind, the way that you work, your approach, one is not necessarily better than the other. But if I know that that's what you value and that's what you need to do your job well, maybe as a lead carpenter, I might treat you a little bit differently as my carpenter, not just drive. To have that insight amongst the team and to know why certain people think and do what they do is extremely powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool.
I love that. Yeah.
Very cool. So that's kind of with your existing team. And then you mentioned starting with some hiring decisions. So talk about how companies use DISC when it comes to the hiring side.
Yeah. So we can do some benchmarking, right? So if we know there's, certain teams or whatever that seems to work well. But what I usually do is, because no one would want to go through an assessment like DISC and answer honestly if they thought they were going to not be hired if they weren't just the perfect fit, right? So I really don't think that's how we should think of this tool set. It's not ruling out or excluding anyone, but what I do is they have their potential hiree take the assessment, and then I sit down with the hiring person, so usually the owner, and just say, okay, here's some questions to ask, right? This person, you're asking them to balance spreadsheets. Is that really going to do they have experience doing that before? And if that's 90% of their job, they're low C, and they're probably going to miss some details.
Mm.
So you need to ask some questions about that. What makes them able to still get the job done to the degree that you want it done?
And there would also be a bit of a concern of
Yeah,
knowing a very detailed bookkeeper type of role. We just know, as the more we study this, the more we realize a very low C on that means not great attention to detail, doesn't really
correct.
thrive off of a checklist,
Yeah.
versus a high C that does.
Oh yeah, they're going to hit all of the
Hmm.
yeah. They're so we can do that. And also, we can look at what hasn't worked in the past. That person needs to be answering phones and they don't like people. So is that maybe going to potentially be a barrier for the first interaction people have with your company?
Mm.
And so we can look at that. The I, that's where the influence comes in, is on high I, there tends to be more outgoing personality. And
Hmm.
then a lower I is going to give you all the facts and data, and maybe they don't like people. Sometimes they
Yeah.
they just do. They just like a few people.
Yeah.
So
And that's a fair thing to say, right? Some people are, it's just that drains their energy, right? The idea of getting on the phone and needing to be a little bit upbeat and bubbly and dealing with challenges on the phone, that can just drain somebody.
yeah,
And what we learn, the more we study DISC, is if I'm a really low I, chances are that is going to drain. It's not that I can't do
yep,
it. It's just that it's going to drain me a little bit more. So
yeah,
for those of you listening to this podcast and you're like, I wonder what Kyle is. He does seem very magnetic. Oh, I just really am drawn to listening to him. He's so funny, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a very high I.
yep,
That's my highest on the disc, and that's not because of I've practiced that or I'm putting on a show. It's just naturally how God made
hmm
me, and it's just how I show up in the world. I'm a
hmm
people person.
hmm
My wife would be like, it's Friday night, let's put on our pajamas and let's just sit here and I'm gonna be so happy. I'm like, do you think the Winans want to get together? Do you think the Ralphs want to get together? Maybe we go out with so and so's.
hmm
Yeah. So
yeah,
understanding that about people, and starting to see that in the hiring process.
yeah,
Let's say in the hiring process. So I think it might be helpful just to go through the DISC a little bit more. So
yeah.
if I have somebody that, I'll give you a couple scenarios. Ooh, we'll make this a little rapid fire round. Does that sound fun?
Sure, sounds great.
Has your husband corralled the child?
He has, and he
Oh,
has
good.
apologized.
Oh, I'm so
That was
sorry.
a
I
little
know
thing
you're.
that came through with C.
Yeah, yes, I'm so sorry. Yes. Maybe next time don't get distracted, husband.
Yes.
Stay focused. They're wiggly. They can get out. So let's have a scenario. I am looking for an office manager, a bit of a person that manages our team coming in and managing people doing a lot of phone work, helping with coordinating the trade partners and that side of things. And I have a personality that has a very high D.
hmm
What would I kind of consider there? What would I be thinking about in that scenario?
Well, that person, it would big question mark would be where their I is. So you can have high D and then very low I,
Hmm.
and they're probably not going to be very keyed into people and listening and
Hmm.
empathetic, right? So if that is an aspect of developing the team, and or not just developing, but communicating and coordinating between the teams, that's going to be tricky, but they're going to get a lot done. So it's a question of how. I also think you can think about in terms of the key leader. So who else is right there with them?
Hmm.
Um, is it the owner, CEO person? Is he going to, or she going to be able to? Are they pairing with each other well? Right.
Gotcha.
And so filling in a gap if need be. But
So really, a really high D. What is their tendency, or what does that usually
they're
come
going
out
to go
as?
fast. They're going to be focused on the big picture, but they're going to go fast and they'll be decisive, and they won't always be concerned about how people feel about that,
Hmm.
and so their communication style will be more direct, which not everyone is always loving, but it can be really
Hmm.
helpful, right? If you just need
Yep.
information, here it is. So they can be direct. um,
Cool. Let's say I have a project manager, an existing project manager, and we're struggling with some of their attention to detail. Some things are slipping through the cracks. The client engagement and communication isn't super strong. Pretty frictiony with the team members. They get they get frazzled pretty easily. What would you suspect their disc would look like?
Guessing that they have, highest on the C, where they're focused on the. Did you say falling through cracks? Was there stuff
Falling through the cracks? Yeah.
Oh, okay. So then maybe I would say highest on the S and maybe lower on I and C, where they're not getting as much. They're just not. They're looking for the consistent pace and not as much keyed into all the things that need to happen. And so if there's a lot of projects happening at once, or that is a really intense period of time, they might shut down in terms of intensity, because high S really does not like that environment of being rushed and pushed and overwhelmed. They are more like, please put me on one project that lasts 24 months rather than 12 projects that last 1 month. So that's just
super interesting, right? But that scenario, like somebody listening to this of going, man, I have a project manager that's just like that. If I throw a little bit too much at them, they just go into shutdown mode. And this is the power of DISC, is once you start understanding that, and you will see what you just described is kind of what I had in my head is, probably a high S. They like the steadiness of it. They like the pace. When it speeds up too fast, it kind of makes them freak out. And issues and things falling through the cracks is probably a little bit lower on the C. Friction among the team could be that they're high D and they're just yipping and yapping a lot too much. And a low I means, they're just not winning people over to their point of view. And there's a lot of kind of button heads. I think in that scenario, one is, do I have the right person on the right seat? But then the other big aspect of this is the more we understand that, the more we can work on that and adapt that and put tools or people around them to help with that, because having somebody that's steady is also a benefit in some ways, right?
Oh yeah. So if you're able to have a few project managers and you have a variety of projects that are coming in, you can strategize which projects that person has, because if they do good work and you like that, and they provide some grounding for the team too. It doesn't mean anyone's excluded from that role. It's just, and if you know why you're having to adapt, that helps so much, right? If you have the awareness of the bigger picture, it just alleviates some of the confusion and frustration that happens in there. So
one of the things I remember when I've taken the DISC a few times, but as you debriefed me on it one time, and one of the things that popped out at me, and this was a few years ago, is based on kind of my personality, and I think it's probably coming from the high I, which I consider in my case very much a people pleaser. One of the things I have to watch out for is Kyle struggles to say no to people. And at first I was all defensive, like, I've been getting better at that, whatever. And then I step back and I realize, no, I do really struggle with that. And by seeing that more clearly and having more self-awareness, for me understanding myself better and how I work has been very helpful in me continuing to improve as a business owner and as a leader. And frankly, what's cool about this is I think this flows into life at home and outside of work just as much. So it's interesting, this idea of self-awareness, of making sure we understand who we are and why we do what we do is very, very beneficial. That idea of this sliding into life outside of work, does a story come to mind at all of somebody you've worked with, or an example of that you've heard of? Man, I was working with this person, might not be related to remodeling, and it's amazing how that impacted life outside of work. Any stories that come to mind? Good old so-and-so.
I know, good old so-and-so.
Or if somebody specific doesn't come to mind, maybe kind of describe how or why that happens.
It comes out to work. Oh, I mean, I mentioned for me, like, I have my workspace, but then it flows into what it looks like to do remodeling with my spouse and how to communicate about that. has had major implications. But understanding for me, the way that it played out was we did a 6 to 8 month full reno on an apartment that's on the back of our property, and most of it ourselves. The only thing we hired out for was the installation of the carpet. And I realized, because I'm a high D and I need to see progress and things to go quickly, and I'm not good in the TDS category, that if I had someone working with us alongside me, that meant we were doing things twice as fast and I could manage, I could survive how tedious it was. But if I was just doing it, then it was way too slow and it was impossible, and I was checked out and I would avoid the project.
Get frustrated.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's just the first one that comes to my mind. I was starting to think, I was jumping ahead thinking about leadership and where your clients are coming from, that a lot, you guys have a unique spot. So I started, 3 years doing disc in the corporate spaces, and almost always we had a very similar profile for all the top lead CEO personalities, right? But for what I understand about remodelers is that the ones that you're interacting with, is they oftentimes were carpenters themselves for many years, and then they decided to grow a business and add people into that. And so we actually have a variety of styles, behavioral styles, that show up in your leadership level for who's running their businesses. So some people are, maybe they did it for 5 years and that was about all I could last, and they were high D and they were ready to build a company and not be boots on the ground as much. And then sometimes it was they really loved that they were high S and C, and so they're very tedious and they have high standard and quality of work, and so people kept wanting to hire them because they did excellent work. And so they realized, well, I could not be so stressed out if I hire and build a company, but I don't necessarily have the drive that high D has to go and try new things and pioneer that. So there's an interesting tension in that space where it's not just a typical leadership scenario.
Yeah, it's all over the board, right? There's to your point. I'm working with 2 clients that I always have my one-on-one clients take the disc, and try to get some insight into them. And 2 stories here in the last 6 months where they're running really nice businesses. They don't have a lot of turnover amongst the team, but they're also just stuck in a certain growth level. And what's interesting is both of them are high I's. People really like being around them, and they like to stay with them, and they, I would say, have a little bit of solid emotional intelligence on things like EQ, right? Yeah. But their D is quite low in both of their cases. They err towards the side of, well, if I sell and take on too much work, that is going to be stressing me out. And both of them are like that, where they need to be a little bit more aggressive to get to that next level. So I'm coaching them on that. And then you have others who are like, making investments in their business and, high D, drive. And I'm like, I know your bank account's fine and we've been improving it, but are you sure you want to take that risk? Like, you think it's time to hire that designer, hire that project manager, hire that estimator? And they're like, yeah, I'm building something here. Let's go. So it's so interesting as you, to your point, remodeling especially is it's a wonderful industry for so many ways. But yeah, it makes for some interesting disc reports too.
Yeah. Cool. And how to stay afloat in this market, right? It's hard. And I don't even know if you got go ahead. What were you saying?
The key is to hire me.
Hire Kyle.
You just hire me as your coach.
Win. I think you got a good thing going there.
Work just goes like this. We never have any challenges with team members or permits or leads. I'm joking, but it does help. So is there one, as we kind of close, is there one thing related to DISC that you wanted to mention that you may not have so far? And then if people want to reach out and they say, hey, this DISC thing is kind of interesting, maybe I should reach out to Laura and take it myself. That would be a good first step. Have her debrief me on it and get more familiar with this. If we can close those 2 things. So one, is there anything DISC related that you wanted to mention or share that we haven't yet?
Well, one of your clients said to me this last year, we all took the DISC a few years ago and then we put it in a drawer. Like, what do you actually do with it? And so I do think that having someone come alongside your team and support the facilitation of communicating about it is really a helpful step. And so And because we're all reactionary in terms of our business, I think we all make some effort towards intentionality and proactivity, but having that space carved out, some kind of coaching space where you can explore your own growth and your own style and understanding. So that debrief being a really key place, or even having some coaching along those lines, is really helpful, because otherwise we're reacting and we're not.
And to your point, we get excited about it. We do some training on it, and then it goes into a drawer. If you walk in Forward Design Build in Ann Arbor, what you're going to see is Jeff and Monica have the disc wheel up there. All of their different employees are on that wheel. Before you go into maybe a little bit of a challenging meeting with one of your team members, you're encouraged to review page 6 of the disc to see how are the best ways to communicate with this person. There's so many ways to integrate DISC into your day in and day out leadership. So like all good things, make sure we don't just get all excited about it and then, that's done, but making it a recurring part of things. So if people wanted to explore this and get started with this, how do they get a hold of you, Laura?
So I have alongwork.com, or you can just more simply my email, Laura, spelled traditionally, at Birkey, BIRKEY, .com is my email contact. So if
Laura Birkey at alongwork.com.
No, sorry. No. Laura at Birkey.com.
Ah, interesting. You said the traditional way. You mean the correct way, spelling Laura the correct
only way.
Yes.
No, I don't want to offend anyone. I like other people. I tried to change my name to Lori once, and when I went off to college, I was going to change it so I could. So I'm jealous of people who have non-traditional.
So alongwork.com or Laura at Birkey, BIRKEY.com.
Perfect.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Laura. We got people fired up about DISC. That was our goal.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Kyle.